What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
Good morning. Good
Good
morning.
afternoon. Good morning.
Good morning, my fellow mammals.
It's mostly good afternoon.
Hey, Mike, that's a little presumptuous.
Am I generalized? Am I?
Yeah.
It's presumptuous that it's morning, or it's presumptuous
No,
that
that they're mammals.
Oh,
They're
okay.
mammals, exactly. Hey, there could be
Pretty
some
sure they're all
guppies
mammals.
listening. We're big in the
Absolutely.
guppy community.
Hey guys, guess what tomorrow is? No, it's not voting day in the States.
It's official knock knock joke day.
Well, you're gonna tell us that, I know, but it's
Yeah.
Halloween, right?
Ooh.
Yeah, so we have a question about Halloween. As you're coming in the chat box, would you put what was your favorite Halloween costume ever that you actually wore, not that you saw? Favorite Halloween costume. How about you guys?
I was a pregnant skeleton because I thought that was ironic.
And that was only last year, right?
I want to know if people are dressing up tomorrow too.
Yeah. How about you, Mike? Do you remember?
Probably a mountain goat.
A goat. Okay.
Yeah.
Jerry says that he was a robot. I actually went in college with my girlfriend, future wife, and I went. We got pumpkins, we hollowed them out, and we actually put them on our heads and dressed all in orange and black. And it was fun. It was heavy.
That sounds like a fun costume. My favorite
How about you,
costume was,
Dan?
I was being a teenager because it was an excuse for me to wear makeup since I was a child. So I came as a teenager, whatever that is.
Perfect. And did people ask you what you were?
I don't even remember that far back.
I'd
Oh,
like to
okay.
go as a teenager now. If I
Yeah, me too.
pull it up, see if I could pull it off. I love
Carol's
that.
sister went to, yeah. She went as a shower scene in Psycho.
The
An
what?
entire scene. I love that.
Yeah.
You know what I thought was
Yeah.
great? New York City has the Greenwich Village parade every Halloween. And one year there was a whole group that came as Imelda Marcus's shoes. And that was
Everybody.
so cool,
Oh,
like a
that's
whole
hilarious.
group, because
That's
they had a closet full of shoes.
Funny.
Excellent.
I was in New York, Diane, for Halloween about 6 years ago. I had a front table seat at this restaurant. It was insane how everybody was dressed up. Like everybody was dressed up. The costumes coming out of the
Big
tax
party.
season.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Crazy.
Well, let's get started, guys.
It's usually
Yes.
okay.
Sorry, Diane, we'll cut you off. How rude we are to our hosts, our guests, I mean. But good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, wherever you are, Mike. But good afternoon to the rest of us. I'm so excited that you're here for every other Wednesday. And Mike, what day is it?
It is October 30th, 2024.
Excellent. And while you're speaking, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Michael Kerr. I'm coming to you as I usually am from Canmore, Alberta in the Canadian Rockies. I speak on workplace culture and inspiring leadership. My latest book is Small Moments, Big Outcomes, How Leaders Create Cultures That Fuel Extraordinary Results. And today is official Mischief Night, Checklist Day, Haunted Refrigerator Day, Candy Corn Day, World Audio Drama Day, Publicist Day, and Create a Great Funeral Day.
Hold on. What was the refrigerator one?
Haunted Refrigerator Day.
My refrigerator is haunted. I swear I put stuff in there, I go the next day and it's gone. So,
That's called having kids.
oh, something's happening, right?
Either that or a mouse.
Oh.
Exactly.
Or it's that guy that opens and turns off the light. He's eating.
That's right. Sanjay Nath.
My name is Sanjay Nath. I am based out of Toronto. I am a speaker and author focusing on leadership and performance. Mr. Toe.
And my name is Jeff Tobe. I am a learning and development specialist. I am also a speaker and author on the area of coloring outside the lines, creating memorable customer, patient, member experiences. And I am so excited to introduce our guest host today, Diane DiResta. Diane is a certified speaking professional, as are all of us. And we got it because we speak so clearly and so good.
Be good. Be real good.
Yeah. She is the CEO of DiResta Communications, Inc., based in New York City, consultancy serving business leaders who deliver high-stakes presentations, whether one-to-one on stage or actually virtual platforms as well. She's the author of Knockout Presentations, How to Deliver Your Message with Power, Punch, and Pizzazz, the P's, and has spoken in 4 continents. Her book actually appeared on the billboard in Times Square. None of us can claim that. She's past president. How many were you guys past president of your local chapter? You were, Mike? Oh yeah, me too.
Well,
So
I was national president.
well,
Presidents.
that I know. We have 2 national presidents of the Canadian Association, but that doesn't count because Diane was past chapter president of NSA New York, right? She was featured on CNN, quoted in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Her her LinkedIn learning course, say that quickly, Speaking Confidently and Effectively, ranked in the top 20 most popular courses for 2 consecutive years. And finally, she made the list of top 20 speaker coaches and trainers by zoneofgenius.com. And I just want to add a personal note. Diane, I have had the pleasure of working with you over the last 3 weeks around the country. Diane and I have been at the same program in Idaho and in New York, upstate New York. And it was such a pleasure. The evaluations that you received were, 5 out of 5. I thought it was amazing. So I'm so excited
Wow.
that you agreed
Thank you.
to be here today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I just
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to say, Mike often gets 5s as well, but they're out of 10. That was one.
Right.
This
That's
second
the
thing.
main difference.
Can you just tell that story about Diane? You maybe share the story about you were putting in the information into your phone. I think that's hilarious. When Jeff asked you to do this and you were taking down his phone number?
Yes. So he called. It was announced in NSA about this program. They were looking for people to participate as speakers.
Yeah.
And so
Let me just qualify, not this program, the program that we worked on together.
yeah, that's what I'm
Yes.
talking about.
Yes.
And NNL, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I called him up. Well, I called him up and I found out about it. And I said, all right, well, I'm at a conference. Could you give me your phone number and I will call you back? And so I went to open my phone and I saw his name in there. And I said, Jeff Tobe, you're in my phone already. How are you in my phone? I didn't realize. And then the 2 of us realized later on we had both been speaking at the same event. I think I went first and you went second, or vice versa. And it was in the state of Michigan. So we had already met and didn't realize.
In 2011, that's the
Yeah.
bizarre thing. But anyway, that's not why we're here. We are here today to talk about knockout presentations, about presentation skills and how it relates to corporate culture. So I'm going to ask you right off, how does effective public speaking impact one's success and visibility within corporate culture?
Tremendously, because if you have to be seen and heard in order to be successful. And so if you're not seen and heard, you can quickly become invisible. And even if people know you're competent, you're not on their radar. So when there's a high stakes, high profile project or a promotion, they don't think of you. It's not that you aren't qualified, they just don't think of you. So it's really important to get out there. And I always say that public speaking is the new competitive advantage, and nobody can be without this anymore. We've all got to up our game, elevate our skills, but it allows you to make progress and to be known in an organization and to make an impact. But visibility, especially.
Yeah, I have a challenge with the words public speaking, not for what you probably think, but we're talking about any kind of presentation, right? So it's not just getting out there and speaking in front of 1,000 people. We're talking about one-to-one, one-to-many, correct?
Many times people say, well, I'm not really a public speaker. I don't do public speaking. And I'll say to them, do you leave voicemails? That's public speaking. And it's not about being in front of 100 people on a stage. But I have to reconsider what I'm saying, because if you're Gen Z, you may not be leaving voicemails. You may be leaving text messages. So it's still communication, but without the voice. So we'll have to figure that out. But I mean, anytime you have a one-on-one meeting, that's public speaking. One or more people.
Even for beyond the business context, if you go on a date, hello, or if you're in an interview, like anytime you're in an oral conversation with another human being or mammal, Mike, you're public speaking, and if you can do that effectively. The other unfortunate reality, and I don't know if you guys know this or not, but there's some election or something going on next week. Anyone hear about it?
Well, I heard of that.
Okay, so and I'm not trying to be political because that's a different call altogether. But regardless of your political stripes, there is a whole game to being political. And it's so much to do with how authentic and how trustworthy you come across in a presentation, and not necessarily because any politician or any president, he or she is going to have advisors and policymakers and people think, oh, that president is smart. They don't have to be smart. They can be a trained, well-spoken puppet, and they can be the most effective president.
Yes, that's the key. And I'm glad you brought that up because this year, a couple of months ago, I was coaching someone who was running for local office. I think it might have been town supervisor or council. Anyway, he's kind of a curmudgeon and he's very good and bright and a good businessman, but he cannot stick to the script. It's very hard. And he had his handlers telling him what to say. And he said, I can't stand this. So I had days where I would say, throw away that script. I don't want any practicing. You go out for a walk and you're not going to work on this today. And then the whole thing is be yourself. So I would say to him, just be you. You've got to have your messages. You can't riff and go off on a tangent, but know what your key messages are and then just be you. And that seemed to help him because you're right, Sanjay, authenticity is the key. In fact, when they do research on executive presence, that is one of the top qualities or traits now of communication and executive presence, authenticity.
Well, and as you say, Diane, this is so important in the workplace in so many contexts, right? You could be speaking for just 1 minute in a meeting and you want to put your best voice and foot forward. You could be selling an idea to your boss, which is something a lot of people need to develop that skill for doing. So circling back to your comment about authenticity, what do you think gets in the way of people being authentic?
I think fear. It's about how can I be polished? I don't want to make mistakes. Well, this is the culture, so I have to be like everybody else, and you don't. And I once did a presentation on executive presence, and the question for the breakout room was, can you have executive presence and pink hair? And the idea here is we all live in a culture, but it doesn't mean you can't do something a little bit unique. So let's say you're in banking, which is really conservative. Okay, so you're going to wear the suit, but maybe you have a fancy pin or a colorful scarf or a little streak in your hair. You can still be you. And if you can't, then it's the wrong culture. And what we know is that most of the time when people don't succeed in a company, it's not a skill mismatch, it's a culture mismatch. Most of the time. So are your values in sync with the values of that company? And so questions about the culture are probably even more important than the actual job duties.
So
yeah, Sanjay wears choo-choo pajamas underneath his
I'm not gonna
clothes. Yeah,
he's being himself.
Yes, exactly.
You talk about fear, and when a lot of people hear public speaking, we heard the old cliche, the number one fear, number two is death, blah, blah, blah. Why are people so scared of speaking?
Well, it's interesting, Sanjay, because when I first wrote knockout presentations, I did some anecdotal talk to the person on the street kind of research. And they would say things like, all eyes are on me. What if I trip? I don't like being the center of attention. And when I looked at the theme, it was fear of humiliation. That's what I really think it comes down to. And that's a strong emotion. And so what I do with people is I teach them recovery strategies. So two things, mindset and skill set. Let's get the mindset. Let's know the skills. But then what's your worst nightmare? Let's plan for it right now. Because when people feel a sense of control, when they have a strategy, it's a little easier.
It's one of the things stand-up comedians do a lot of, because as you can imagine, a stand-up comedian will have a lot of jokes that bomb. So they actually have rehearsed lines. So if the joke bombs, and sometimes those lines are actually funnier than the joke. So, they get the cricket and they look at the audience and they're like, wow, it was much funnier this morning when I told it in the shower, right? And then people, it's because the audience has their shoulders go up when there's an awkward situation or they feel bad or there's embarrassment or something, their shoulders do this. And unless you give them an opportunity to release, your audience is going to be like this the entire time. So you give them an excuse. Like if you trip, the worst thing in the world to do is to not acknowledge it, pretend like it didn't happen. You say anything, go, ouch. Go,
you're so right.
Right. And then the audience goes, okay, I can be human again and I can let it all go.
You know, Sanjay, it actually happened to Oprah. I saw a video where she's walking on her heels on stage and she falls right on her butt. So she's sitting up and her response was wrong shoes. You know, and people started laughing. That's what I mean by recovery strategy. So if you don't take yourself so seriously, the audience will respect that because mistakes happen.
In
And
about two, oh, sorry, Diane.
I
Didn't
was
mean
going to say
cut
the
you off.
best comeback I ever heard was these two actors at the Ryman Theater were singing songs, and one of the actors hit a bad note. So talk about shoulders, right? And when he finished, he stopped. He looked out at the audience and said, I want to thank the audience for seeing me through puberty. Well, everybody laughed and they roared. You had so much respect for him because I was wondering, what is he going to do? So it happens to everybody.
That's great.
Oh, and it happens to all of us, right? We're supposedly veteran, experienced professional speakers. I still screw up all the time. I was going to say Sanjay's example of tripping. Way back in like 2002, I was opening speaker at a safety awareness conference. Actually fell off the stage.
I've done that. I've
So-
done it too.
Yeah. So they
Flat on my
definitely
back.
noticed that. I had a
think they would
line
notice.
ready. I had a line ready in my back pocket. I wasn't hurt at all. And some of you probably know the line. I rolled over onto my back. I had my lavalier mic on. I leaned into the mic, and as I was lying there, I just said, "I'll now be taking questions from the floor." And if you do
You
those
could've-
things right, you get
You
the
could have
audience
also
on your
said, "Don't
side.
mind me. It's just a stage I'm going through."
Yeah.
Oh
What
my
I'm
God.
saying, if you have these recovery lines, there was a professional speaker who had 5 things go wrong. The slides didn't work, the lights went out, whatever. And each time he had a comeback line. And then he said, it's a good thing a 6th thing didn't happen because I didn't have a 6th comeback line. So, you know, having that in your back pocket really helps.
Exactly.
Well, and
So-
some of those moments when they're just improvised and you go with it, they turn out to be the best parts of
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
presentation.
But that goes back to your point, Diane, about being authentic, right?
Yes.
So I mean, you wanna have a planned strategy to a certain degree, but you don't want it to be scripted. You want it to go that if this happens, you know, I got something, but then I can be real in the moment and go, ouch, or you know, it's the wrong shoes or whatever it is. But go with it and then play. And if you are
Right.
truly in the moment, you'll be surprised how the universe gives you the line you need.
Right.
Mhm.
So
People,
I'm-
they're not going to
Go.
fault you. They're just not going to fault you.
Yeah,
People
know
that's the thing we have to remember, right, Diane? I think is that, and I remind people of this who are nervous about speaking, audiences are on our side. They don't
Yes.
want us to fail. They want to hear our message. They want, and they know, because they are afraid of public speaking. They know it's a challenging thing to be up there. They are on our side. They always are.
But
Really
by default, there, I've said that for many years. I go, never in the history of audiences has an audience member walked in going, I hope this sucks. I hope it's
I
a waste
know.
of my time. I hope it's useless and I'm really bored and feel embarrassed for how bad the speaker is.
It's,
Right?
it's
They go in going, I hope this is hilarious. I hope this is awesome. So by default, they're on your side. Let's give them an excuse for them to stay on your side.
Yeah.
yeah.
exactly.
And tying this back to the authenticity thing too, and I'm sure, Diane, you've seen this. We've all seen this. I've seen so many stiff corporate CEOs, senior leaders speaking, and they're so stiff. They're in presenter leadership mode. Hey, I'm doing my Sanjay impersonation.
right.
I'm doing my Sanjay impersonation of impersonating other people. So you're up there doing the presenter mode, and then they screw up. And you see the body language change, they relax, they smile. And I'm always sitting there in the audience thinking, that is the
That's
human
it.
being we
Yes,
want to
that's it.
hear from.
Yeah.
I've had that as well. I was coaching somebody. He was a vice president of a bank and he would present the numbers. And they said, he's just so dry and dull. But when you see him outside and having a beer, he's like a good time Charlie. Like, where is that personality? So bring your personality. Don't
That's
be
right.
in presenter mode. And when we talk about culture, I was thinking years ago, my sister was stationed in Korea, in South Korea, because she was in the Air Force. And I went to visit her and we got to see a soldier presenting. And this is how he presented: arms behind, talking directly in front, remote. And, you know, it was everything that I don't teach, but I thought about it. That was the culture. And so he was doing what was expected. So for me to come in and say, oh, that's all wrong. No. So whenever we talk about public speaking culture, you want to be who you are, but you also want to be true to the culture. Because what I remember, it was a management consultant, I think Peter Drucker said that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And it's so true. And you can have a great strategy, but if it doesn't work in the culture, forget it.
Yeah.
What and what are
You mentioned one of my pet peeves, Diane, and that is the people who point their remote at the screen thinking that's going to make it the next slide come up. But anyway, I just want to jump, Sanjay, before you make your point, jump to the comments. Rob saying he wants to know, Diane, your take on abbreviated communication, including text. And then I don't know what the heck these three things are, but
IDK is, I don't know.
Okay.
You got the first one, Jeff.
ICYMI.
I don't know that one is. TTFN is ta for now. I don't know ICYM.
Oh, I see. So these are short forms you would put in.
We call them acronyms.
We call them acronyms.
Acronyms.
Well, I know
LOL.
LOL, and I know, in my humble opinion, it's hard for me to say because, again, it's culture. If you're working with a younger generation and that's how people speak, then you do that. Would you do that to the CEO? I don't think so. I think you'd want to be a little bit more formal and more respectful. So again, it goes to culture and to industry and also generation. It's really it goes back to who's your audience.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say it's what you talk about. When I heard you speak, you talked about know your audience. Can you talk more about that? How do I know my audience? How do I research that?
Well, I always talk about how is public speaking like a YAM, and it's a formula for everything you need to know about speaking. Know yourself, know your audience, know your message. So how do you get to know your audience? Well, first ask some questions. What do you want to know about them? What do they value? What's their style? How do they like to receive information? What's the demographics, the age, the gender? What history do they have? What do you know about the culture? And then interview a few people. If you know people who know your audience, call them up or text them and ask them, how does this audience respond? So that's one way to do it. You can also send an email to people. Or if you're really thrown in cold, you can do an on-the-spot analysis. You can say, how many people of you have ever done whatever? And just by show of hands, you can get a sense of who's in the audience. And if it's a small group, let's say 10 people, you can actually go around and ask for introductions, give them the questions to answer, and you'll have a better sense of who they are.
Well, and Diane, on that note too, when you say audience, I think it's important to remember too, it could be an audience of one. So if you're trying to communicate effectively with your boss, and if you want to be seen, like you said earlier, and rise in your organization, then it's really important to know that audience of one and what their preferred communication style is, what resonates with them, what they like, what they don't like. So you can adjust your conversations even that you're having with your boss to them.
Let me jump in.
Yeah, and go ahead, Sanjay.
I was going to say, we're talking about authenticity. We're talking about knowing your audience. You're giving us some concrete things here. But putting all that together, what are some of the big mistakes people potentially would make in terms of engagement and oral communications with teammates, bosses, subordinates, peers, etc.? And what are some of the pitfalls we should be avoiding?
All right, some of the pitfalls, and I'd say one of the top ones, maybe even number one, is lack of focus. They don't have a focused message, and that's why they can't get to the point or they're going off on tangents. So here's my remedy for this. I give people a fill-in. At the end of the presentation, the audience will blank. The answer to the blank is your outcome. When you start with your outcome or the end in mind, then everything that you develop, the slides, the message points, are going to lead you to that. So why are you doing this? Are you trying to persuade, convince, inform, entertain? What is your purpose? So once you're clear about the outcome, another mistake is what you said, Jeff, not knowing the audience. And the big mistake is you'll see these dog and pony shows. They have the same presentation and they give it exactly the same way. And that's why you're a star in Canada and you bomb in Thailand, because it's a totally different audience. So it's got to be tailored. And then another one, I'll think of three, is being speaker-centered and not listener-centered. And by that, I mean, most people begin a presentation like this. Good afternoon. Today, I want to talk to you about public speaking. Well, okay, but that's your topic and your agenda. What do they care about? So or let's say you're in a company and you're going to talk about a new machine or product or process. If you're talking to managers, it's a pretty good guess that what they care about is productivity. So start with a hook. What do they care about? Good afternoon. Today, I know that everybody here is concerned about productivity. How can we be more productive within the same time? Well, the problem is we don't have the resources in place, so we're duplicating efforts. That's why today I want to talk to you about our XYZ system that's going to streamline business. See, now I've got people's attention because I'm speaking your language. So be listener centered, not speaker centered.
Except
So I
they
would say
want
those
these guys
top.
want to know about XYZ.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh yeah, I said Z because I'm not an American, but I knew what it meant.
And what's the
Um,
third mistake?
that was the third mistake. So
Oh, I'm
not knowing
sorry.
lack of focus and the being speaker centered.
Yeah,
And the other thing is in terms of your audience and tailoring it, here's the challenge with culture. I'm working with someone now and she's doing a presentation on tax. She's going to give it to the board and to her peers. Problem is she can't change the presentation. It's going to be the same presentation. So what we're working on doing is tailoring it. So her culture gives her the slides, they give her the template, and she's got to do it. So we're talking about how do you position it for the executives? What do they care about? And then, or say the audit committee, and then how is it different for your peers? And that's how you can work within culture and still maintain some individuality.
one of your in the YAM, the acronym, the beginning is know yourself. What do you mean by that? Know yourself when it comes to presenting.
Go back to what was said earlier about trying to be professional and being like somebody else. Being yourself, knowing yourself is, first of all, how am I wired? What's my style? How can I leverage that and be true to myself? It goes back again, Sanjay, to authenticity. So know yourself, know your style. You're a package of skills. So what is your personal brand? And then be you. So personal brand, ask yourself, what are 2 or 3 adjectives I would use to describe myself? And that's how I want to be perceived. And you can manage your brand through public speaking. Do you have time for an example?
Sure.
Okay, so there was this woman, Carla Harris, who was the first African American managing director at Morgan Stanley. And she told a story that when she was coming up in the ranks, she wasn't getting the promotions and she didn't know why. And they said, well, Carla, you're not tough enough. Enough. I'm from the Bronx, New York. What are they talking about? So with that information, what she started to do is she would seed them with that idea. She'd be in a meeting and say, well, I was tough on those people. I'm tough on that. I took a tough stand. Eventually, it started to trickle down, and she knew she was successful when she hear people say, well, Carla, she's tough. So again, public speaking is a powerful tool for getting your brand out there, for being visible, for being seen and heard.
You're talking about that idea of brand and authenticity. I had one of the best compliments I ever received for being a speaker wasn't meant to be a compliment. In fact, it was meant to be a dig. And so but I took great pride in it. My ex-mother-in-law came to see me speak for the first time. And she went home and kind of crossed her arms and went, he's the same on stage as he is off stage. And I was
Right.
like, yeah. Right. She was expecting some grandiose character, not a sarcastic smartass. And she was kind of let down. But so here's the thing about the idea of authenticity and brand is it's so much easier and you don't have to play a character and it's not as exhausting and it's actually more invigorating and you don't have to remember the script. You can just be it instead of recalling it and rehearsing it. You're in flow, you talk, you are who you are.
It's so true. I think if Jeff remembers in one of the sessions, I accidentally said, this is the most simplest. And I stopped and said, did I just say most simplest? I meant simplest. That's a moment of just being yourself.
Right.
Because I was not going to let that go. I'm not agrammatical, but people are fine. They said, yeah, you said it. Okay.
You bring up another good point. I mean, there's a difference, maybe a slight difference between, a prepared presentation for minutes or even an hour than there is with what you were doing as a full day's training. So we can't be perfect, in that full day. So, it takes the pressure off of people. Diane, if I was just coming out of college into the corporate world, are there 2 or 3 points you would tell me about presentation skills that I can think of right away that I should be working on?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is join Toastmasters. And that's an organization of public speakers, not necessarily professionals, but they have all walks of life, because you need to hone those skills
Mhm.
and look for opportunities where you can speak. Don't be shy. If you're in a meeting, give an update, offer to speak. Sometimes companies have lunch and learns. If you have an opportunity to do that, do that. If a company has a webcast, if you can be on that webcast, even if it's one quote, do it, because you want to get your name out there and you want your voice to be heard. So contribute at meetings. And this is especially true with women. They tend not to speak up sometimes. And then again, you get looked over because you're not visible. So people don't hear your voice and they think you're not there. So I would say speak up, contribute, offer to speak when you can, and join Toastmasters.
Oh,
And find mentors and role models of people who you think are really good speakers and model from them.
fabulous tips. Thank you. So flipping that around, if I'm a manager in a company, are there things that I could do to encourage employees to develop their communication skills, develop their presentation skills, to treat this as a priority in the workplace?
So you can bring me in and you can buy my book. What I would do, first of all,
That's a great idea.
well, when you talk about diversity, sometimes the same people are the speakers. And so as a manager, what you want to do is look at your team and who are the people who keep talking. Don't let them dominate. And usually it's the extroverts. So when you have introverts on your team, send an agenda in advance of the meeting. And well, I'm an introvert too. But I just like to speak. And actually, that's a miscommunication. Introverts have good social skills. It's just that they need to process more before they speak. So give them the processing time by sending the agenda in advance so they can think about it, and call on people or let them know you're going to ask for their contributions and engage the audience. Sometimes when leaders run meetings, they're the whole show. I would make it more about them, get them talking, do some brainstorming. And for the shy people or the people who are of a different culture, you can put them in small groups and then have them report back. Because, for instance, in Asia, in Japan especially, they're not going to raise their hand necessarily because that's too assertive or an affront to the instructor. So you put people in groups so they can speak and be at the right level and then ask the group to report back. So those are some things that I would do. And then I would develop people. I would look for opportunities. If there's a Toastmasters within the company, recommend that people join that.
For years, when I've trained people on speaking, I've always said there are 3 elements, especially if you're nervous. There's usually 3 elements that it comes down to as to why people are nervous: the size of the audience, the length of the program, or the topic itself. So if you don't know nothing about the topic, you have increased anxiety. If the audience is really large, you have increased anxiety. If the program is really long, you have increased anxiety. So if you know nothing about nuclear physics, to sign up to do a 5-day course that you're teaching on nuclear physics in front of 5,000 people is a bad idea. However, if you love baseball or you love telling jokes and you can tell a joke at the lunch meeting that's a 30-second joke in front of 12 people, you're walking on the growth zone. And then from 12 people, you tell it to 50 people. And then from 50 people, you tell a longer joke. And you just kind of keep stair-stepping it up rather than jumping into the deep end and freezing in anxiety.
Absolutely. And you can also try different media or mediums. So for example, instead of standing up and doing a presentation, be part of the panel. Have 3 or 4 people there and you're speaking. Or you can do a fireside chat, have somebody interview you. So there are a lot of different things you can do. Start with very short speaking. Do it online first. So work yourself up to getting your speaking legs. As you said, you don't have to jump in the deep end.
It's funny you said that, Dan. In Idaho, one of the attendees said to me that she was asked to do a presentation on a topic. She was asked by her manager or the executives to do a presentation on a topic that she really didn't know a lot about it. So she called the experts in the organization and just facilitated that panel, and they loved it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I thought that was a great idea. Diane, I want
Yeah,
to go ahead.
and I said it's not one size fits all, so you can be
Right.
creative with this.
Right. So I want to go back to we're always taking comments in the chat box, and Rob wants to know, what tips do you have for being authentic in the face of an audience that is not of like mind?
What would that mean exactly? Are you saying
Well,
they're
I
a
can read.
hostile
Let me
audience?
read the rest. It says, being yourself and knowing your audience can be tricky bedfellows. In psychology, the concept of chameleon behavior is associated with borderline personality disorder. So what tips do you have for being authentic in the face of an audience that is not of like mind as you, if you're presenting, I guess?
So I'm not sure I understand exactly the scenario, but the first thing is I say, name the elephant in the room. So if you find that they're not like you or they've got a very different persuasion, you might want to put that out there and just let it be known. And the most important thing is to show that you care, that you're really interested in what they think, what they feel, and you can even invite some of those discussions and say, all right, so we have different opinions here. I know this is the group perspective. So I'd love to hear more about that, and then you're inviting people in. And
Mhm.
so you have a much more harmonious situation. So that's one of the things that you can do.
Okay.
Best thing though is to prepare in advance for that and know what you're walking into. Uh, I heard a story. There was a speaker one time who came into a meeting and he's talking and nobody's responding. It's dead silence. And he said, what's going on here? Did somebody die? And somebody had died in the,
No.
yeah, it was not good.
That's
So
take foot
better,
out of mouth.
yeah, exactly. Insert foot. So it's better to say something like, okay, so what's going on? Talk to me. Or I saw someone joke one time and he'd say, this means yes, and this means no. So he was, joking with them. That's authentic. That's being yourself.
I've once in a blue moon where I've just had a horribly cricket-like audience. I've occasionally put up my hand and said, "Does anyone here speak English? Anyone at all?" Just, but I think too, on that note, Diane, too, I think one thing that's worked well for me is in those situations is honoring their expertise and acknowledging their expertise and saying something like, so if it's a nuclear physicist, like Sanjay's example, saying, hey, I don't know the first thing about nuclear physicists. I'm speaking to a room full of brilliant people here. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm not here to tell you how to do your jobs. This is why I'm here.
And yeah,
Great opening.
one of the pieces on authenticity is answering that question is, why have you been asked to present? And it's for a reason. Like, sometimes because I was doing some work with some controllers and they were like, oh, I hate announcing the numbers, because they just want to crunch the numbers. And I was like, well, why are you asked to? And they kind of got to, well, because we know them better than anyone else. Exactly. So when you kind of own that and you can say, yeah, I don't play in your sandbox at this level, but here's my piece and I'm really good at it. And that allows you to deliver. It also gives you the self-confidence to do it. You can get your message, get out of there, and then move on to the next thing.
No, it's interesting that you said that. I forgot who the politician was, but he was involved in taxes or something, and he was at a national speakers conference, and he was talking. He said, "Okay, now here comes the boring part." And then he went into the numbers and the taxing, and we started laughing, and he was really good. But that kind of thing, that humor and being authentic and naming the elephant in the room, taxes are boring. So that works.
Let's talk about engagement and getting your audience engaged. You have, I know, two masters here. Well, yeah, two of us. I'll just leave it at that. No, but Mike and Sanjay both are amazing at getting their audiences engaged. But I shared with you at dinner one night, Diane, that recently after the program, that I was observing at the back of the room while you were doing your presentation. And there was Diane started with basically, I want you to find a partner, and this is a full day's training, right? And so it was very interactive. And when she said that, this guy turned to the guy beside him and said, I hate when we have to work with other people. He's a manager, for God's sake, a leader in the company. And every
It was
time
funny.
she said, get into a group, he would go, oh no, like this. That's an extreme. I get that. But it's not, the point is that it's not right for everybody, right? And so how do you make sure that you're all inclusive and getting everyone engaged? Do you have any tips?
Well, you try your hardest. You use your powers of observation. You see who's not participating. You can during a break. Let's say they're in groups. You saw that I walked around, so you can have a little side conversation and see what's going on. You can invite somebody to talk about what was helpful or what they're going through. That's one thing. Um, to make sure that everybody's engaged, get them out of their seats if you can, because there's something about moving the body and changing the energy that helps, and hearing from different voices. And if you find that there is a little group that is not participating, you can refer to them and recognize them for whatever their contribution is. So
What if it's
that's
I mean, we had this question, what if it's a virtual presentation and no one's allowed to this is a question, guys, that we got. No one's allowed to put their cameras on because it was a government agency. And they're asking, how do we get people engaged when it's virtual?
That's the worst when you can't put the cameras on, but let's assume that that's the company culture. Here's how culture impacts your presentation. Then you can put a picture of an audience and put it right on your desktop, just so that you have a visual. Or another thing is, in your mind, you can create an avatar and talk just to that one person, so you feel that you're not talking into the air, but you're visualizing a person. So that's one thing. But then you want to have some engagement techniques. So if you can put people in breakout rooms, that helps. I use the chat a lot. Sometimes I'll just say, if you agree, put a Y in the chat for yes. So it's really fast. They don't even have to write the whole word. And I will do that periodically. So the more that you can break it up, the better. I would say also with virtual presentations, you need more slides, not less. Because if you have one slide up there and you're talking for 5 minutes, they tune out. But if you can create movement, that creates some engagement. And I do weird things, like I'll tell people to unmute their mics. Are they allowed to do that?
Yeah,
Jeff?
I think that would,
Okay,
yeah.
so I will say, unmute your mic, repeat after me, and then I'll demonstrate up talk. Today is Wednesday. Today is Wednesday. And they'll have to repeat it the way I did so they can hear the contrast. So that's one thing. Also, if you have any kind of little quizzes or polls, that tends to be engaging as well. And it's great to do that in the beginning to see, where are people from? What are their levels? One of the things we did in the full day is we asked about generations, which created some interesting discussion. So those are
I would jump in with one too in terms of engagement. I'm a big believer of, you have to earn the right to have people engage. So sometimes, and I've seen this, and it's usually a rookie speaker where, the first thing out of their mouth is, they're like, everyone stand on your chairs and dance. And people are looking around going, I don't want to stand on my chair and dance. And it's not that you can't ask an audience to do that. I think it's unfair to do if that's the first thing out of your mouth, because you don't have a relationship that enables you to do that. If it's at the end of the day, and they're the right audience, and you've observed and you've built up, like you're saying, asking to raise of hands or type Y in the chat box, these are low risk activities. But if you're asking to sing or dance, then we go back to this whole fear of being rejected or being humiliated. And then the worst thing is if someone ever makes fun of an audience member, and especially if they offer a suggestion. It's like, oh my goodness, you're asking for help, and then you're shot down. It's like, no. So
yeah,
the worst.
It's about building trust, Sanjay,
Yes.
right? That's
Yeah.
a large part of it. Building trust, and if you've shown as the presenter that you're okay laughing at yourself and goofing around and being a little silly, it helps create that environment, that trust. But I think too, one thing that's really critical, because this drives me nuts, is whenever we do those kind of activities, have a really good reason for doing it. Like have the debrief message be
Not just
very, very
gratuitous.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Diane, we're running out of
Give
time,
people
and
a reason.
we're running out of time, but you mentioned something that caught my interest, and that is uptalk. It's one of my pet peeves. Can you explain it and demonstrate it again? Because
Uptalk?
Up talk or up speak is a rising inflection. It sounds like I'm asking a question. I'm really making a statement. And it used to be called Valley Girl talk. It was
I was gonna
female.
say.
Now that's not the case. It's generational.
Yes.
I say that I don't hear it at the executive level. And although people will come back at me and say, well, that's just being, whatever. Uh, it doesn't work for you in the workplace. If you want to talk like that with your friends, fine, but it will not serve you in the workplace because the meta message is in the voice, not in the words. So if you say, I'm confident that we can achieve this, the audience is saying, I don't think so. And every audience is thinking three things, even though it may be subliminal. They're thinking first, who are you? Can I trust you? Do I like you? So that goes to the authenticity. They want to see your humanity. Number two, they're thinking, who are you to tell me? Meaning, what are your credentials? So again, talking up front about how you earned the right to be there. And the third one is WIIFM. What's in it for me? Okay, I like you. You've got the goods, but why should I sit here for an hour? What value will you bring? So the earlier that you can bring that information out, the better. And one of the quickest ways is in your introduction, when someone introduces you, to put some of those things in there.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I am the unofficial timekeeper of this group. So, and we've come to an end very quickly again. When that happens, Diane, we love it just because we know that we had an amazing guest. So thank you for
Thank you.
for being here. Stephen Rayfield has put a link for everybody on Knockout Presentations right there.
That's very
Thank
nice.
you.
Yeah. And thank you to our amazing audience who's always participating. We will be back on November the 13th. No, November 13th, right. And we will have another amazing presentation. I don't know if we have a guest or not, but my question is, Mike, you have to take Richard's spot. You ready? This is a tough one. When do we see everyone?
Every other Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye.
Diane, so much. That was
Thank you,
brilliant.
Di.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween.